I never believed that hauntings were real until the summer of 2015 when I spent the weekend at an old family cabin on Lake Michigan with my best friend Daniel. His uncle had inherited the property many years prior, and he told me it hadn't been relocated since the late 80s. We both thought it would be a mini vacation, a cheap place to drink fish and get out of the grind of our lives in Grand Rapids. We drove out there through seemingly endless woods and side roads. By the time we made it up to the driveway, the sun was going down, low, lighting red stripes across the lake in the distance. The cabin looked like it had sat empty for decades. Its wood was gray and cracked with a porch that leaned ever so slightly toward the ground. There were loose, old shutters, and the windows looked more like black holes than they did glass. I remember joking that this cabin looks like from a horror film. Daniel did laugh, but it didn't sound sincere. He admitted that his uncle never really said anything about the cabin, only that it was not safe for kids and to stay away from it. That should have been my first red flag, but we brushed it off. Inside, the air was stale, like the house had been closed up for decades. It was all dusty over. The living room held mismatched furniture that seemed to be from the 60s. There was a coffee table with a photo album and faded photos of smiling people unnaturally at family gatherings, most of which by the lake. But some of the more recent pictures didn't seem right. One showed the cabin at night, completely dark except for a single light in the attic window. Another showed a boy leaning against the water, his face out of focus in a way that couldn't possibly have been caused by the camera. That night, after a couple of beers, we tried to sleep in the upstairs loft. The wind from the lake rattled the windows, and I kept hearing something gentle, almost like footsteps creaking across the wooden floor below. At first, I thought Daniel was sneaking around, but when I called him names softly, he answered beside me. Sometime after midnight, I was startled awake by the slam of the front door. My heart bounced into my throat. I woke Daniel with a prod. He came out of sleep mumbling something and sitting up. We both heard it then. Slow, heavy footsteps slogging across the floor below us. They weren't rushed, weren't quiet, just steady, deliberate strides. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and spoke quietly. "It's probably an animal." I knew that no animal opened doors and moved this way. In spite of my better judgment, we crept down to the living room. It was vacant. The door was open softly, smacking the frame in the breeze. The strange thing? The deadbolt remained set like the lock had never even been touched. We shut the door and locked it again. That is when we both heard it dripping water. Not from the sink, but upstairs. When we came back to the loft, the flash beam landed on something that made me gasp. On the edge of my sleeping bag was a small puddle of lake water. Naked and white footprints went from the window straight to where I had been lying. I swear to God I didn't leave that room with her. We did not sleep much after that. Daniel tried to joke it off by suggesting that maybe the roof had leaked, but the prints were too distinct and the water was too cold. At dawn we loaded our stuff and vowed to leave that day, but I was the one who made the mistake of suggesting that we linger another night. Something about the location had me captivated, like it needed me to see whatever was lurking there. We went down to the lake that day to get some fresh air. The lake was serene, but the beach was littered with broken branches and soggy footprints directly into the trees. They weren't ours. We hadn't used that section of the beach. The prints were small like a child's, but deep like whoever walked in them was intolerably heavy. Daniel wouldn't talk about it, but I could see by how pale he was getting. At sundown, we tried to take our minds off it with fishing. That's when I saw the shine of water. Standing at the line of trees behind us was a dark, tall, motionless figure. I turned around, but the beach was empty. The reflection radiated out, and Daniel snapped at me, begging me not to mention what I witnessed. When darkness fell, the cabin was stifling. The air was oppressive, heavy, and damp like being underwater. At midnight, Daniel woke me up. His eyes were wide with terror. He whispered, "Do you hear that?" At first I thought it was wind, but no, it hummed. A low, tuneless hum from up in the attic above us. We never gone up to the attic before. There wasn't even an actual staircase, there was just a hatch in the ceiling with a pull-down ladder. The humming got louder, sounding almost like a child, and I'm convinced it was right over where we were lying. In spite of all that inside me, I pulled the ladder down. The odor in the attic was of mold and rot. Our beam of light shook as it cut through old furniture and boxes. Then we noticed it against the rear wall, a bed frame, draped with rotting sheets. Over the sheets was a sailboat toyed damp, as if it had just come out of the water. The humming stopped the moment we arrived. The silence that ensued was worse than any sound. And then from the corner there was the squelching of footsteps. We left. I don't think I even recalled slamming the stairs. We grabbed what we could, made a run for the door, and sped to the car. The moment the headlights reached the lake, I saw something I'll never be able to forget. A light-colored figure, standing waist-deep in water, its head leaning unnaturally to one side looking at us. We didn't utter a word the entire ride home. Daniel never returned to the cabin, and I never saw him the same after. A year later, I heard he sold the property to some distant cousin. I don't know what happened to it after, and to be honest, I don't care. I still dream of wet footprints at the bottom of my bed, and I inspect my floor every time I wake up just to be sure.